So you were made for a mission. We'll continue looking at what that means. I want to start with a big idea this morning. And like I said to you last week, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I can just share with you what I've come to believe. And I can share with you, what I've learned so far. And maybe when I get to 57 years of marriage, I'll have a completely different idea of what marriage is than what I have now. That's just how life works. We learn things. We walk the path. We learn things. We improve. We go back. We make mistakes. We improve. And it's just how it is. There's always a constant improvement and constant growth happening. So I want to share with you a big idea, a big thought that I believe right now, which in a sense determines, in a big way how I look at life and when I listen to people. And this is something that I've picked up when I did counseling a lot more, and through all my studies of psychology and all these type of things. And just spending time with people, I've come to realize this big idea that I want to start today with. And I'm going to bring it back to this idea of you were made for a mission. The slide says, the questions in your heart, or the questions in our heart, determine the course of our life. Now, some experts say that thinking is nothing other than just a process of asking and answering questions. See, even when I just said that, subconsciously, even in your mind, you would have gone, well, is that really true? And so it's always this process of asking and answering questions. But the powerful idea that I want to start with is this idea, is that the questions you and I hold in our hearts, unconsciously or consciously, really determine the course of our life. It's not our circumstances, it's the questions, and a lot of other things of course, but it's especially the questions we hold dear and the questions we embrace that determine how we look at life, how we look at this journey that God's put us on, this world we live in, the people that we live amongst. All of those things get determined and impacted by the questions you and I hold in our hearts. So I'll give you this one that says, this question: how would things, or could things change for you if you started asking some new questions? If it's true that the direction of my life, we're talking about having a mission and I was made for a mission, if it is true that questions determine the course of my life, or differently put, the questions I ask determine the type of mission I will embrace, if that is true, how would or could my life change, or how would I start doing life differently if I started asking some new questions? I'll give you a good example. I want you to see if you can see the difference, the slight distinction in this question, because a lot of people that I've met in counseling anyway has a version of this question in their heart, some way or another. And the interesting thing is this question determines what they do. Like maybe you see problems and challenges, and those are all the symptoms. But the symptoms are simply a symbol of a deeper underlying issue, and it's often the question they hold in their hearts. And this is an example of a question like that. And don't worry, I'm going somewhere with this, so just give me some patience. Just be some patient. I said to my next door neighbor yesterday, I write as long as I talk, because I do both long, but I'm thorough. It's just how it is, trying to cover all angles. But let's look at this question quickly. This question is, if you can see the distinction, but I want you to see the difference. If this is a question that is maybe this doesn't ring true for you, but I know some people that this is a big word would be an existential question for them, meaning it determines everything that they're about. Their whole existence is determined by this idea. And some people go through life with this idea: why this life? Why this life? And versions of it, of course, But what if you change that question slightly to why this life? Can you see and hear a difference? See, if that became a question that burns in my heart between why this life to why this life, you're actually moving from something I call frustration to fascination, or from frustration to the chance of being fulfilled. What if you took this question, because there's a lot of books have been written on this question: why am I here? Why am I here? It's a big question. What if you changed that question and said, why am I here? Can you hear the difference? See, if I started doing life if I did life with the first question, why am I here? I can get caught up in this whole idea of, looking for reasons, and the reasons behind my issues and the challenges and the problems and all those things. I can look at it through a lens of frustration, that why don't I cut any breaks? Why don't I get any new opportunities? Why are doors constantly being slammed in my face? Why this life? Why am I here? But if you shifted that in your mind, or allow it to be shifted to why this life, then suddenly you open yourself up and say, "Well, why am I here?" You might actually start looking at the things that you might see as problems right now, or the things that is coming into your life completely differently, which will change how you look at you, which will change how you feel about you, which will change what you do ultimately. Now, this is a very big, I guess, psychological idea that I've broken right down in very simple terms for you, but I need you to believe me on this. Take my word on this. I want us to ultimately move from frustration to fulfillment, because a lot of us go through life kind of thinking that my life is an accident. I'm sort of the sum of two people who came together 50 years ago or 60 years ago, and that's it. And kind of I've just made the best out of this thing that I call life. Or things have happened in my life that I couldn't foresee, or things have happened in my life that I don't like, or things are happening in my life that I don't like, and that's just, it's the way things are. It is what it is. But I want us to move away from frustration and start looking at ourselves differently. Because the scriptures are challenging us, the teachings of Jesus and all that are challenging us to do exactly that. Is to stop looking at ourselves as an accident, to stop looking at ourselves in a certain way that is disempowering, where I just grovel through life, and start looking at ourselves as perhaps you're not that big accident as you thought. Perhaps there's a reason why you're sitting right here, right now. See, you might think it's a complete accident. It's just a culmination of a lot of things coming together. But there's a reason why you're sitting right here, almost quarter to 11 on this Sunday morning, right now here in New Zealand, the small church on the corner somewhere, in the north. There's a reason why you're listening to my words. Now, what you and I are going to do with it is obviously up to us. But I want us to move away from frustration in our lives to fulfillment. And the only way that's going to happen is when you and I start looking at ourselves differently, when we allow the lenses we've been allowing to grow in our lives, and we've been looking at life and people and everything through, that we allow those things to be changed. The moment it changes, everything else changes. And that's when we start looking at, and we start getting clearer about this whole idea of maybe what I've been looking at and have been seeing as frustration. Maybe that's the fuel I need to fuel my mission. That's just jumping the gun a little bit, but perhaps that's what we need to start doing. So I thought I had more time, but I'm not going to go into these four guys too much. But I just thought about these four blokes. Sorry, I didn't include any women in this. I will next time only have women. But if I thought about these four people's lives in Scripture, this is not personal friends, this is Bible figures. And if you think about Moses, Moses' life, Moses could have easily, and he probably did a few times, what we surmise from Scripture, a few times look at his life and go, but why did all this stuff happen to me? Why is it that I was born a Jew, but I was raised as an Egyptian, and then eventually God called, and then I killed an Egyptian, and then I was called back to go and free my people. So I was an enemy and kind of not liked by the Jews because they saw me as an ex-king, and I was also not liked by the Egyptians because I was seen as a murderer. So why did all of this stuff happen? Yet, think about how things would have been differently if Moses was just born as a Jew. If he never became, a king of the Egyptians. He wouldn't have understood the culture. He wouldn't have spoken the language. He wouldn't have understood how things work. He wouldn't have understood how the king or the Pharaoh's, courtship and all, and all those things worked. He wouldn't have had any understanding of it. Yet he was born in a certain way, in a certain time, and he was placed in a certain way, which ultimately became a big part of the role he had to play. Now, he could have stayed in frustration about why this, nobody loves me, nobody likes me, I'm going to eat some worms. So what's the saying? What does the kids sing? I'm going to do that. Nobody likes me, I'm going to eat some worms. He could have done that, but he didn't. Eventually God got him around and got him to see it a bit differently, look at himself differently. What about David? David could have felt, well, I'm the youngest of all these sons, and I'm this and I'm that, I'm just a shepherd boy. Yet, think about how the scriptures would have been differently. We wouldn't have even had half of the Psalms if David wasn't a shepherd. Yet we read the words of David 3,000 years later, exactly because of the journey he went on, because he was a shepherd boy and he became a king. God showed something that that he wanted to do through this young boy. He became one of the most beloved kings of the Old Testament, of history probably. Think of Peter. Peter was a fisherman, rough and tough, rough as guts. Probably didn't speak very nicely, yet Christ chose him and said, you're going to be the rock of my church. Now, Peter could have gone, why wasn't I born as a religious dude? You know, somebody that was just in with the in crowd. It could have been a lot easier. Yet, I think God wanted to show through Peter that I can build my church on something that is quite unlikely. I can build my church on someone that is the not obvious choice. Somebody that's as rough as guts. You know, I can do that, and that's what I want to do. Think of Paul. Paul could have gone, well, why was I, you know, why did I have to kill a lot of people or allow a lot of people to be killed before I became this? But just think how things would have been differently if Paul went on that journey. He had a completely different understanding about grace because of his past and what God allowed to, you know, happen in his life and how he turned it around. Those are 4 examples. I can give many more, but I don't want to. So I want you to, because I just want to talk about these 2 ideas in the next 15 minutes. You are not an accident. I'm not going to try and prove this anymore. But you are not an accident. You are designed and you are shaped for a reason. And we're going to break that right down over the next couple of weeks. I just want to talk about design this morning, and I want to talk about the S and the H and the word shaped. And we'll do the rest on a different day. Designed. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is probably Psalm 139. And it's a very long psalm, but there's these 2 verses that says, you saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God, they cannot be numbered. The first sentence is really the one I want to emphasize here. You saw me before I was born. Now that can mean one of 2 things, can't it? It either means that I existed before in the spiritual realm, before I existed in the physical realm, or it means that God saw me before I was created, meaning He already had an idea of who I was going to become before I was here. That's the only 2 things it could mean. And so what I took from this is that ultimately you and I are designed, and when we understand that we are designed, we get a better understanding of our value. And that is important for your mission. See, a lot of Christians, a lot of people of faith, they never understand that they're designed, which means they undervalue themselves. And when you undervalue yourself, you undervalue what you've been given. You undervalue your story. You undervalue the skills and the tools and the experiences and everything that makes up you right now. You undervalue that. And so the first thing I want you to realize this morning, this is all I'm going to say about design, is that God saw you long before you were born, long before your parents thought of you. He saw you. That's what the Scriptures say. That's what the ancient people believed, and I believe it also. He saw you before you were born, which means you have value. You are not just the culmination of 2 people coming together. You are not just an accident. You have value. But guys, as I said last week, it doesn't matter what I tell you about who you are. When you look in the mirror and you see something different, it doesn't matter what I say. I can tell you that you've got value in the spiritual realms, and there's a reason why you're sitting right here, right now. There's something that you need to take away from this that will improve your life or the lives of people around you. There is something about this today. You have value. I can tell you that all day long, but if you go home and look in the mirror and say, I am an accident, or you go home and say, I am a disappointment, I am a failure, if you go home and say this and see that, none of this will make a difference. I hope it would, but it won't. All I can hope is that you will allow your heart to be penetrated with this. The fact that you are designed means you've got value. And maybe just by embracing that this morning, you will also open yourself for allowing to see that maybe you have a mission in this life. Let's talk about shaped. I like this because every letter stands for something. And I've got a few slides for you on this. So when you understand your shape, so when you understand you're designed, that gives you your value. When you understand your shape, that helps you understand that you have a purpose. So when we start thinking through the shape we have, because we're all different, we're just all different. You know, none of us look, perhaps those 2 young boys in there look similar. You know, the twins in there, they look similar. Some of you have seen them. But the rest of us, they're not similar. You know, the most identical twins on the planet's not similar. We're all different, and there's a reason why we're shaped differently. Some of us look at it as a problem. Scripture teaches us that there's a reason for it. So when you understand your shape a little bit better, and that's what I want you to reflect on over the next couple of weeks, is it maybe gives you a clearer idea of what your purpose might be. It doesn't matter where you are in life. So the yes, in my opinion, the yes stands for two things. The Spirit, meaning God's given us a Spirit, and He's also giving us the Spirit's gifts. But the Spirit's gifts doesn't come first. The Spirit comes first. So I'm not going to talk about the Spirit's gifts today. I'm going to spend a lot of time just on that. I want to talk about the Spirit. He gave us His Spirit, okay? So there's this very cool passage in 2 Timothy 1 verse 6 to 7 where the Apostle Paul talks to Timothy. Now Timothy was a young man in a congregation. He was given this job, and he was quite fearful and quite timid. And so the Apostle Paul writes this second letter to Timothy to encourage him and to tell him about his grandmother's faith and his mother's faith, and to sort of encourage him and say to him, look, ultimately, that's why, and he writes all these things, and he said, that's why I remind you to fan into flames the spiritual gift God gave you when I laid my hands on you. Okay, so from this we surmise that Timothy was given a gift. God gave him a gift when Paul laid his hands on him, and so to serve him and to serve the people. But Timothy, is being encouraged in this passage to fan the flames. Okay, and there's an important thing in that I want to highlight in a moment. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity. Now I think this is true for all of us too. But He has given us a spirit of power and love and self-discipline. So He's given us a spirit of power and love and self-discipline. Now, a different way of translating that word self-discipline is a sound mind. That's what the Greek can also mean. Not a spirit of fear and timidity. God has not given us that. Now, I just want to say one or two things about this very idea. I believe that whenever God's Spirit is guiding you, because we're talking about mission here, okay? So it's about you living within your purpose. Whenever God's Spirit is guiding us and helping us to live purposefully and within our mission, those first three things are usually at play. Meaning that, there's usually, God's power is at work, meaning that, sometimes you even see miracles happen, so the power is at work. Unfortunately, a big part of the church has run away with this, and so they're pretending a lot of things, or they're making up a lot of things. But when you read the Scriptures, whenever God's Spirit was at work, stunning things happened. But love is also part of that. Whenever God's Spirit is at work, love is usually a consequence or a driving force. And also sound mind is very much part of that. So this idea of some people operating, quote unquote, in God's Spirit, but they're out of their minds, is not a scriptural thing at all. That's what the pagans used to do if you read church history and read the religious history, and that's what Paul speaks against. In fact, when you read the whole book of the 1 to the Corinthians, that's what he talks against. There's a lot of guys at this, they were out of their minds, insane type of things that were happening. People were just talking in gibberish and all these things, with just no structure to it, no discipline to it, nothing. And Paul is saying, no, when the Spirit is, God did not give us a spirit of fear and timidity, but He gave us a spirit of power and love and sound mind, or self-discipline. And for me, this is always a good test when I kind of look at my life and I go, Lord, am I actually now, if I take on this thing, is this actually within the purpose that You have for me, within the mission that I'm all about? And when those three things are not there, I've got to question whether that is the path I need to be on. Whenever I have fear and timidity at play, I've got to question it. Because whenever I operate in the shape that I'm made in, fear and timidity is you might have some nerves and stuff, but confidence and power and love is very much part of that. It's a place of certainty. So the challenge I have for you this morning is to realize that the gifts of the Spirit, or when God gives us His Spirit and when He gives us His gifts, ultimately it still needs our cooperation also. Is that ultimately you and I need to be open for Him to work through us and allow these things to come to the fore. It's very important. It doesn't change our personality, but God gives us what we need to do, what we must do. But you and I need to realize that He gave us this Spirit that is within us. It's not a spirit of fear and timidity, but a spirit of power and love and self-discipline. The H, heart. And I won't be too long on this, because I've done a long one on heart in the past for those of you who've been here. But I'll just give you a couple of ideas. In Proverbs 4:23, this is a very cool passage. It says, with extreme care and persistence, watch over, guard, and take care of your heart, for it determines the course of your life. Now, when you read the scriptures, heart is a when we read heart, it's like, okay, this is the thing that pumps blood. And we also talk about heart, so it's our emotions and those other things. So, you've got your heart is sore, or it's hurting, or you're sad in your heart, or you take God into your heart and that type of thing. So we talk about it in that sense. But the ancient people, when they talked about heart, they had a very long list, a big understanding of what the heart actually is about. And so when we read the scriptures and it talks about the heart, you've got to have this in mind also. This is what they're talking about. Is when scripture tells us to guard our heart, watch over it. It's not just talking about protect this thing that pumps blood. It's actually talking about these things. It's talking about, the heart is the seat of your thoughts. It's the seat of your thinking, of your will. It's the seat of your attitude. It's the seat of your discernment or ability to judge and decide. It's a place where, decide well. It's a place where you hold your affections, a place where you hold attachments or have attachments, the things you're attached to. It's a place where you have your dreams, your ambitions, your hopes, your interests. That is all your heart. And so the hard part of this mission thing that I'm talking about is there is a reason why you have your emotional and spiritual heart, and it differs from this person sitting next to you. There's a reason why you think the way you think. There's a reason why you have certain affections towards some things. There's a reason why your heart burns with passion for some things and other things you can't be bothered with. Now, one of the mistakes we sometimes make is we want to be a master of all, or a jack of all trades, and a master of none. That is a mistake we sometimes make, because God, if He wanted you to be everything, He would have made you everything. There's a reason why you have your shape. There's a reason why you have your heart. There's a reason why even in our marriages, a wife would be passionate about something and the husband would be passionate about something completely different. There might be things that they have that are similar, but there's a reason why your heartbeat beats differently. And you need to explore why that is for you. Because ultimately, when you start understanding why your heart beats the way it does, not physically, but the way it beats, it does, and for the things it beats for, that is usually a very good clue as to what you need to be busy with in your life. And if you're not, chances are you'd be living, like Thoreau said, a life of quiet desperation. Chances are that's what will happen. The heart is ultimately the source of your motivations or your passions. Now, here's an interesting thing. The word passion that we're throwing around nowadays is like, well, I've got to have passion for this and passion for that. But the word passion actually comes from the Latin word, which at its root has the meaning of suffering. So when I'm really passionate about something, I'm actually willing to suffer for it. That's when I'm really passionate about something. So it's not just I like it, It's not everything that I'm passionate about I like. I don't, it's not like Paul liked sitting in prison, but he was passionate about the good news. He was willing to suffer for it in that example. So whenever you have a passion that burns in your heart, I want you to start paying attention to it rather than just compartmentalize it or park it till next Sunday and then I'll look at it again. Because the challenge will become, how do I make that passion, that thing that burns within me, that thing that consumes my thoughts day in, day out, how do I allow that to become part of my career? How do I allow that to become part of my business? How do I do that? How do I allow that to become part of my practice? How do I allow that to become part of my parenting or my marriage? How do I do that? That's when the needle starts to move, when we allow those things to happen and start asking those questions, different questions. In Deuteronomy 10 verse 12 it says, serve the Lord with all of your heart. Now there's a couple of signs usually when you start serving the Lord with all of your heart. Now look, I want to just make this clear. I'm not asking you to become ministers. I'm not asking you to become pastors. I'm not asking you to become missionaries. This is not what this is about. This is about finding your mission even when you're a dentist. This is about finding your mission when you're a real estate agent. It's about finding your mission when you're a retired person, or a grandmother, or a grandfather, or when you're working at the refinery. It doesn't matter. This is about asking, when I'm serving the Lord with all of my heart in what I do, this is the way I pay my bills and stuff, there's a couple of signs that you've got to look for. The first one is usually enthusiasm. Is that when you're operating within your giftings, when you start operating within your person, within your purpose and within your shape, there's usually enthusiasm. In fact, that word comes from two Greek words, entheos, which means you are filled with God, or you're in God. You're enthused. You are filled with Him. That's what that word means. Which means that when I do what I do, I do some business coaching and counseling and all those things, but when I'm there, you can ask people who've been in there, I'm just as passionate on that stage that I'm like him, because I talk. That's what I do. I talk. And I love talking, and I love sharing, and I love adding value to people. Now, if I said, no, I don't want that, you know what? Next Sunday, Jimmy, you're going to sit down, I'm going to be leading on the guitar and exposing these beautiful people to my beautiful voice. You know, it might not be that great an experience for you, because it's not my shape. Yes, Alan, I'm...
He's here.
Yeah, no, let's not. No, it's not. And so ultimately it's really about you understanding your shape, because your shape will give you a good clue in terms of your mission. So enthusiasm is very much part of it. If you're not enthusiastic about something, about what you're doing, you need to maybe ask some questions about, am I actually allowing God to use me the way that I was made, regardless of the job I have, regardless of the role I am? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about who you're allowing to become and who you're allowing to be, yourself to be, regardless of where you're at. The second sign, or usually a good sign, is you're very efficient. Meaning that what you do is usually, very easy for you, and you do it very easily and with a lot of confidence. See, many people often ask me, Bill's asked me many times, how do you do all this without notes? And I've got many notes and I prepare very well, but the point is I speak from my heart. Most of you will know this, because I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about seeing people free. I'm passionate about seeing people happy. I'm passionate about people hearing the truth and living in the truth and not be deceived by stuff. I'm passionate about that. So it comes naturally. But if you put me behind a guitar wanting to sing to people, or you want me to draw some pictures, that's not who I am. I won't be enthusiastic, and it won't be that efficient. I won't be that efficient in it at all. Maybe you are. So don't want to become a speaker. Maybe pursue what you need to do through who you are. The third one is usually enjoyment. You love it. It's not working, you just enjoy it. It's great doing it. Happiness. That's when you know that you're getting closer to what it is that you need to be doing. If you hate what you're doing, I don't think that perhaps you're listening very well then. Or you're not allowing God to speak and show you, in terms of what it is that you need to be doing. Those are the signs. So here's my final word. I think it's my last slide. Figure out your heart, quote unquote, and then you build your life around that to honor God. If you're somebody that on the inside all you can think about is other people and helping people get over challenges and problems, because you have a compassionate heart, but you're working at the refinery where you're cleaning stuff and it's a manual labor type of job, I'm not telling you to become a counselor. Maybe that's something that's on the cards eventually. But what you can do is that nothing's standing in your way to become a listening ear for your colleagues and the people that work with you, to allow that gift to be expressed and to be used during lunch times. There's nothing that stands in your way to do that. If you're somebody that's passionate about singing, you've got to find a place where you need to sing and share that. If you're passionate about justice and about seeing kids make it in life, there's no point for you sitting behind a desk as an accountant if you don't have some avenue where you allow that passionate thing about justice to come to the fore and be expressed. You'd be miserable out of your mind. My challenge to you is to discover your heart as we go through this over the next weeks, and then start building your life around that to honor God ultimately. That's the shortest and the fastest path to fulfillment and freedom, in terms of our spiritual walk on this side of the grave anyway. That's me. I hope I served you this morning.